There's a version of Steve Harvey the whole world knows. The big laugh, the raised eyebrow, the perfectly timed pause before the punchline. But there is another moment, one that his production team still struggles to talk about without their voices changing, where the cameras were rolling, the audience was watching, and Steve Harvey could not speak. For 10 minutes. Because of one question from a 5-year-old boy named Caleb, who was wearing a blue shirt with sailboats on it, and who had been told, in words as gentle as such words can be, that he was going to die. His name was Caleb James Patterson. He was 5 years old, with a gap-toothed smile and ears slightly too big for his head. The kind of ears, his mother always said, that he was going to grow into one day. She had believed that for a long time. She had built a future around it. Caleb had been diagnosed with a rare, aggressive form of leukemia 14 months before the day he walked into Steve Harvey's studio. His medical team had been honest with his parents. Aggressive treatment had bought time. But the disease was not following a path anyone wanted to follow. His parents, Darius and Angela Patterson from Memphis, had not told Caleb everything. Children know more than adults think, and differently than adults fear. Caleb knew he was sick. He knew the children's hospital better than he knew his kindergarten. He knew that some days his body felt like lead, and other days he could run until his mother called him inside for dinner. On his good days, Caleb watched television, and his absolute favorite, the show he had watched every Sunday afternoon with his grandfather since he could remember, was Family Feud. His grandfather had passed away 2 years before Caleb got sick. They had watched the show together on Sunday afternoons, shouting wrong answers at the screen, arguing enthusiastically about nothing that mattered. Laughing, when his grandfather died, Caleb had asked his parents if they could keep watching. "So I can still talk to Grandpa," he said. Angela wrote a letter to the show's producers explaining this. They called her within 48 hours. 6 weeks later, Caleb, in his blue sailboat shirt, his best pants, his sneakers that he'd asked Angela to double knot, walked through the stage door of Family Feud in Los Angeles. Steve Harvey was waiting for him at center stage. Steve had been briefed completely. His producers had walked him through everything, the diagnosis, the prognosis. Caleb's personality, funny, opinionated, had strong feelings about pizza, believed that the survey answers for any question involving food were almost universally wrong. After the briefing, Steve had stood alone in his dressing room for a few minutes. Then he had walked out. When Caleb came through the stage door, Steve was already positioned at center stage. And when Caleb saw him, in person, life-size, right there, Caleb stopped walking. His eyes went wide. He grabbed his mother's hand. Then he let go of his mother's hand and ran to Steve Harvey. Steve dropped to one knee, this man in his custom suit, and caught Caleb with both arms. He held him for a moment, and Caleb pulled back to examine Steve's face from close range with the frank, fearless scrutiny of a child. "You're taller on TV," Caleb said. Steve Harvey laughed, real, surprised, delighted laughter, the kind that comes from somewhere you didn't expect to be reached. "That is the first time anybody has ever said that to me," he said. Caleb nodded sagely. "I think the camera makes things bigger." "You might be right," Steve said. And he looked at this boy, this gap-toothed, big-eared, sailboat-shirted boy, and something crossed his face. His producers saw it from the side of the stage. It passed in a moment. But it was real. They played a modified version just for Caleb. Steve let him stand at the podium, let him buzz in, let him shout at the board. The producers had designed the questions to be fun and winnable. Caleb was magnificent. "Name something you find at a birthday party." Caleb buzzed immediately. "Cake." "Number one answer." He pumped his fist so hard, he almost knocked himself sideways. Steve Harvey bent double laughing. The audience went wild. Name something a superhero might say. Caleb thought for a serious moment. Then said, "I'll be right back. I gotta go save somebody." It wasn't on the board. Steve looked at the audience. "I'm giving him that one." The audience agreed, loudly. Darius, standing off to the side with Angela, was gripping his wife's hand hard enough that her knuckles were white. Neither of them were trying to manage their faces anymore. They had stopped trying. For 45 minutes, Caleb played Family Feud. For 45 minutes, he was just a kid. A loud, opinionated, joyful kid who thought the survey people had made several errors and was prepared to argue about it. As the segment was winding down, as Steve was preparing to present Caleb's oversized novelty check, to take photos, to rap, Caleb stopped. He had been in motion the entire time, the way children with limited energy use the energy they have with total commitment. But he stopped, and when he looked at Steve Harvey, the expression on his face did not belong to a 5-year-old. It was old and quiet and searching. "Steve," he said. Not Mr. Harvey, just Steve, as if they were the same. Steve crouched down to his level. "Yeah, buddy?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. He looked at Steve's face, the same direct, unguarded examination as before, but without the playfulness. Serious now. "Do you think," Caleb said, measuring each word, "that my grandpa can see me right now?" The studio went completely silent. Steve Harvey did not move. He stayed crouched at eye level with this boy, and his face, caught by cameras that hadn't had the discretion to look away, moved through something enormous and private. He pressed his lips together. His jaw shifted. His eyes filled. He said nothing. He could not. Angela had both hands over her face. Darius had turned away, his whole back shaking. The audience was frozen, not the uncomfortable freeze of watching something go wrong, but the deep, breath-held silence of watching something irreducibly true. After a long, unedited, unscripted moment, Steve Harvey reached out and placed both hands on Caleb's small shoulders. He still didn't have words. He pulled Caleb to him and wept. Not quietly. Not the managed, controlled kind. He wept fully, with his chest, and made no attempt to stop. The audience cried with him. There was no other option. For just over 10 minutes, production later confirmed the time, the show simply stopped. No music. No redirection. No producer voice in anyone's ear saying to wrap it up. The cameras rolled and the lights stayed on, and everyone in the room, audience, crew, family, sat in it together. When Steve finally pulled back, he kept one hand on Caleb's face. His eyes were red. His jacket was wrinkled where Caleb had gripped it. He was not composing himself for the cameras. He had stopped performing. He was just a man. "Yes," he said. His voice was rough. "I believe your grandpa can see you. I believe he's been watching you this whole time." Caleb considered this the way he considered everything, with the seriousness of a scientist evaluating data. "I think so too," Caleb said. "Because when I do good things, I still feel like he's clapping." Steve Harvey pressed his forehead gently to Caleb's. Just for a moment. A private gesture between the two of them. "You keep doing good things," Steve said. "You hear me? You keep being exactly who you are." Caleb nodded, and then, because he was 5, and because he had the glorious capacity to move between worlds that takes adults much longer, he said, "Can I ring the buzzer one more time?" The audience, still raw, still emotional, erupted into laughter and applause. The kind of laughter that has been earned by tears, that is deeper than ordinary laughter, because of what came before it. Steve Harvey laughed through everything that was still on his face. "You can ring that buzzer as many times as you want," he said. Caleb passed away 8 months later. At his memorial, his parents played the Family Feud segment. The room watched Caleb stand at that podium, gap-toothed, big-eared, blue sailboat shirt, and shout cake. With his whole body, they watched him argue that the survey people were wrong. They watched him ring the buzzer one more time. Angela said in her remarks that watching it was the most painful and most beautiful thing she had ever experienced at the same time. Steve Harvey sent the family a handwritten letter. He did not make it public, but Darius, in an interview sometime later, said only this: "He wrote to us as a father, not as a celebrity, as a man who had been given the gift of knowing our son for one afternoon and needed us to know he would carry that." In the years since, Steve Harvey has been asked many times about the moments that changed him most. He names Caleb every time. Not as a story about sadness, as a story about what it means to be seen by someone who hasn't yet learned to look away. "That boy looked at me like I was real," Steve has said. Just a real person. And he asked me the realest question I've ever been asked on that stage. He pauses. And I think Grandpa was clapping. If this story touched you, share it with someone today and tell us, what is one question that changed the way you see the world?